You guys are very quiet. Or can I just not hear you? Can you guys hear me? Hello? Yep. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh dear, something's not right.
Can you?
Checking my microphone. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. There for a minute, I thought you guys were just messing with me. Unkind to mess with the professor on Zoom. Give me just a few minutes. I'm getting something ready that I kind of thought about at the last minute, and I need a minute to get it finished. How are you guys doing? Did you guys hear the news out of Britain this morning?
Yeah, they have a vaccine.
Yeah, they approved the Pfizer vaccine.
I don't know.
So some of you have been asking about grades. If you've been paying attention to Moodle, you might have seen that overnight I got a number of grades in. So I'm still adding to it, but they're going in. So I'm going to work on them again after I get done with class this morning, but my goal is to have the grades updated in the next 24 to 48 hours. All of your food journal grades are in that I have received food journals for. A couple of you, the food journals have been outside my office for a while. I assume you didn't come pick them up because you're no longer on campus, but just submit the last ones via the link. Just send them in. On the Moodle site, basically.
What other assignments do we have this semester?
So you have all of your food blogging, which is also going to be in there. A number of those are up. I just haven't put the grades in yet. You have your GMO presentation, which is it's graded. I just need to get it up. You're going to have the GMO position paper that's due today. That's going to go in. That's 100 points. You will then also have a 50-point paper that's due during finals week that I haven't talked to you about because we're not getting to that material until next week. It's about food inequality and the distribution of food in the Kansas City area. And I'm actually going to have you start looking at information for that. Actually, I think pretty much in preparation for class on Friday, I think is when we're probably going to start talking about that. So that's what's still outstanding. Most of you did pretty well on your GMO report presentation, so that should actually boost your grade. And then I haven't seen the GMO reports because they're not actually due until the end of the day today. You have the final, you have the GMO report, that's a couple of 100 points there. You have the food desert report, which is 50 points. And then you have a couple of more food blogging. Well, you have the last food blogging, food journal thing. So food journals and food blogging for Thanksgiving is due on Friday. And then I'll assign one last one to finish out the last week of classes and finals week. And then I think that is about it.
What is the food desert?
What's that?
What is the food desert?
So it's a response paper. So I'm going to show you the last thing. If you look in the schedule, the last thing that we're going to be doing in terms of material that we cover is about food deserts. 3 or 4 years ago, I forget how long ago it was, I had the students in the Ecology of Food put together a database of all of the food outlets in the Kansas City area. And we'll talk about the data set in more detail, but it was basically any place that you can buy food that's not a restaurant, not a fast food place, things like this. So it would be supermarkets, corner stores, specialty markets, et cetera, et cetera. And we broke up the Kansas City Metroplex into different geographic regions. And I broke the class up into groups, and they were required to basically find all of the outlets for getting food within those areas. And I gave them weeks and weeks and weeks to work on this. And we got a pretty good database, actually. And then I used some mapping software to essentially create a map that shows you where these things are. So they would look up the place of business, and then they would find the latitude and longitude of it. And then we could create a map of it, and then we could use some software packages to create basically a topographic map where peaks were areas with high food availability and valleys are places where there's low food availability. And so food deserts are oftentimes defined as any place where you have to, any place where a food outlet is more than a mile away by normal transportation. And so we kind of evaluate if there are food deserts in the Kansas City area, and then we look at some historical data on redlining to see what maybe some of the societal causes of food deserts are. And we do this within the context of Kansas City because we are here on the edge of Kansas City. And so we're going to look at those data. We're going to talk about them, talk about food deserts. And it's going to be kind of like we're talking about ethics now. It's going to be an ethics discussion. And the paper that you're going to write is basically going to be responding to those data. So give me one more moment. But that comes at the very end. And because it's a fairly focused idea, and it is it's right at the end of the semester, it's a short assignment. And so it's worth fewer points than the food. the GMO food report has been.
So basically, the only things we haven't done are just that in the final paper, you'd say, and the food blogging stuff.
Food blogging, the paper that's due today, which hopefully you're finished with, or you're coming to the end of being finished with, the position paper, and a final, the final exam, which will be during finals week. That.
And you said the final exam is essay?
No, the final exam is actually a multiple choice test, which you may or may not like. So remember at the beginning of the semester, you took a pre-test?
Mm-hmm.
That test that you took at the beginning of the semester, that's the final. So presumably, whatever is on that test should be designed to kind of test what you've learned over the course of the semester. And so a couple of years ago, just as a method of assessment, I started giving a pre-test, and then about a year after I designed the pre-test post-test, I decided to just make the post-test the final. And so it covers the entire semester. It even covers the material that's here at the end of the semester. And hopefully you've learned something, and so you should do well on the pre-test, on the post-test, even if you didn't do very well on the pre-test. Oh, so that's another, so you guys took the pre-test, right? Yeah, so that's another thing that you get points for that I didn't put in here, and I should have. So I need to remind myself to go back and do that as well. So at the beginning of the semester, you got credit for just taking the pre-test, but when you take the post-test, the grade for your final is actually going to be your grade on the post-test. I forgot about that grade. I don't even have it in my grade book because I got to you a little late because I'm only allowed to run one test at a time. All right. Other questions? So Winston, answer to your email, I'm getting grades up. Grades are up there now if you want to go and look at them after class. Other questions?
You may have answered this already, but how long is the GMO report supposed to be, really?
It's in the guidelines, so it should be 5 paragraphs. An introductory paragraph explaining what genetically engineered organisms are and kind of outlining what the big issues are with them. And then a paragraph dealing with chapter 4, 5, and 6, or 3, 4, and 5, 4, 5, and 6. One chapter dealing with agronomic and environmental effects. Sorry, not one chapter, one paragraph. So an introductory paragraph explaining what genetically engineered organisms are and what the major issues are. A paragraph on agronomic and environmental effects, a paragraph on human health effects, and a paragraph on socioeconomic effects, and then a summary paragraph where you kind of sum up what your argument is to your relative. And that's in the description and has been in the description since the day it was posted. And so I think there's even a page length suggestion, but I think you shouldn't need to take more than 5 pages. I think what the guideline is, you shouldn't need more than 5 pages, but you probably shouldn't be too much under 5 pages is what I said. But I can also go and look that up real quick. So, like I said, it's in the assignment. So here I am on the assignment. Of course, it just downloaded it. So it says here in the second paragraph of the assignment description, you should write this response in 5 paragraphs, and the paper should be no more than 5 pages long, but should probably not be much shorter. So I have a pretty good memory about what I wrote at the time. Does that help, Marcus?
Yeah, I just don't want to waste no more of your time, so I'll just stay after class.
Okay, all right, sure. Okay, so today, hopefully you've finished reading chapter 4 and have also read chapter 17. Chapter 17 is entitled The Ethics of Eating Animals. So here at the beginning, I actually just want to run a little quiz. So if you could turn on your participants tab, I'm going to put my participants tab up so that I can basically give me a thumbs up if you would eat the following organisms and a thumbs down if you would not. So give me a minute to get the slideshow up so you can actually see the things that I am showing you. You would think I would be better at Zoom by now, but I just am not. Can you guys see a cockroach? Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Thumbs up if you would eat it, thumbs down if you would not. Like if you would make a meal out of a cockroach. Thumbs down, X. Mary, would you eat a cockroach? You would not. Okay, none of you are down with the cockroach plans. So I need to keep score. So everybody's down with that. Or not down with that, actually. Do you guys know what this is? Anybody? It's the larva of a heart of palm beetle. And when I was in Peru living among Shipibo Indians in the Ucayali, in the rainforest along the Ucayali River back in the 1990s, this is a delicacy. These things live in the heart of palm trees and they are really sugary. I haven't even told you anything about it and you guys are telling me that you wouldn't eat it. So the heart of palm, nobody is interested in the heart of palm. Anyway, it lives in the heart of the palm tree. It can kill a palm tree, actually. And actually, when the palm tree is killed by these things, the Shipibo Indians would cut it open and they would get these grubs out of the middle of the palm tree and they would actually crush them into jelly because they're actually just full of sugar. And they make jelly out of them. Missionaries in that area would make pies out of them. I've actually had heart of palm grub jelly, and it's actually quite good, surprisingly. What about this dude? Would you eat this? Oh, Marcus, did you change your vote to thumbs up after the description?
Yeah, I did. I like sweets.
Okay. You guys know what this is, right? We've talked about this in class. What species is this?
It's like some type of honey ant, honey pot or something.
Yeah, it's a honeypot ant. Who was that?
Winston.
Winston. Yeah, tell us about the honeypot ant.
I don't really remember about it. I just remember what it was called.
Okay, so this is a honeypot ant, and these worker ants actually fill up on honey and basically serve as a food supply for the other ants. And hunter-gatherer cultures, Aboriginal people in South Africa and Australia will eat these as a good source of carbohydrates because essentially the abdomen is just full of sugar. What they'll do is they'll grab the ant by the thorax and they'll just pop the abdomen off into the mouth and swallow the abdomen and the sugar water that is inside the abdomen. This is a red-footed tortoise. How many of you would have red-footed tortoise? It's a tortoise from South America. Okay, so Winston would have tortoise. Nice. When I lived in Peru, once again, I got invited to go on a hunt with, hold on, let me check something. I got invited to go on a monkey hunt with a village leader. And whenever you're in a native village and the village leader asks you to go on the hunt, you just kind of do out of protocol. And unfortunately, they went hunting for monkeys and guans and tortoises. And they found a tortoise. It was a very large tortoise, an old tortoise. It was about as big as the back of my back. So anyway, I was not really down with participating in the hunt, but I did accompany these Yamanawa Indians out near the Brazilian border. And they found a tortoise, and the village leader had, I guess she was about an 8 or 10-year-old daughter. And they strapped this like 80-pound tortoise onto this little girl, and she hauled this tortoise around for a while until finally I felt bad for her and told them to strap the tortoise on my back. And so they fashioned a sling for this tortoise and strapped it on my back. And I spent the rest of the day running around the rainforest with a tortoise strapped to my back. And I felt terrible because I'm a herpetologist. I study amphibians and reptiles. And there was this very old female tortoise, who probably 70 or 80 years old, based on the size of her. And I knew that she was destined for the stew pot when we got back to the village. So there was quite a lot of cognitive dissonance for me that day. So only Winston, have you ever had turtle or tortoise, Winston?
No, but I mean, just thinking if it was like cooked right, I think I'd be down to try it.
Yeah, if you're ever in southern Louisiana, there are a lot of turtle farms where they raise snapping turtles for human consumption. So it's basically like a concentrated animal feeding operation for turtles, and you can get things like turtle soup and things like that in the southern Louisiana area. And I've had turtle soup before, but it was all farmed. Would you guys eat these guys? Kenton. Oh, I just hasn't changed. Okay, so suddenly everybody but Branson is good with eating the cows. Branson, are you a vegetarian? Oh, Branson's good with eating cows also. So everybody is good.
Yeah, it's just
cows.
It's a little late.
What's that? Oh, just a little late. So how would you feel about eating the big cow versus the little cow? All in favor of eating the big cow? Okay, all in favor of eating the little cow? Okay, so notice how things have changed. Everybody pretty much was in favor of eating the big cow, but now it looks like there are at least 4 of you who are against eating the little cow. What's the difference? They're both just cows. Why did some of you change your tune? Mary and Olivia and Blake and Branson. See, now I can call you out because I see how you voted.
I mean, at the point in time, I wouldn't eat the little one just because like the growth and the best meat is on the bigger one for now.
Okay, so part of it's quality thing. What about the rest of you?
Just doesn't seem right. I don't know.
Okay, just doesn't seem right to you. So one of the things that you should try and do is unpack for yourself, what is it that doesn't feel right about it? You know, if it's okay to eat this cow, why is it not okay to eat this cow? If you're making that distinction, there's something about eating cow that you're a little uncomfortable with. And so, you know, thinking about what that difference is would be useful to you as you think about the ethics of eating animals. What about these guys? Eat or not eat? So 5 of you would be in favor of eating, and 2 of you would be in favor of not eating. Whoa, that didn't work out right. I guess that I was putting this together at the last minute. Give me a minute to unpack these 2 guys. This is what happens when you are up late at night grading papers and you don't adequately prepare for class. All right, how about this pig? Who would be in favor of eating this pig? Okay, all right. Those of you who changed your minds, so now everybody's in favor of eating this pig. What's the difference between these pigs and these pigs?
Isn't one wild and the other's kind of domesticated like farm?
Yeah, so this is a wild boar, and these are 2 cute little baby piggies on a farm. I would actually be much more in favor of killing and eating this pig because this pig does damage to native natural ecosystems, whereas these pigs, they pollute water and things like that, but we could, in theory, contain that pollution if we wanted to. Forget the pig. What about this chicken? How many of you would be up for eating the chicken? Okay, looks like everybody's up for eating chicken. How about this? Okay, so all of you are against eating cats. Cat's just another potential source of meat. What's your qualm about eating a cat?
Social convention.
Okay, Kenton, unpack that. What do you mean social convention?
I mean, we live in a socio-historic environment where like eating cats is taboo, where we're like trained to see cats as companions, not as food.
Oh yeah, because I just went to see if Misty was in the room next door, so I could show you my family companion cat, who we will not be having for dinner tonight. Because actually we'll be having pig tonight. What about this bad boy? Oh, that was a very quick response from everybody. Once again, why not dogs?
Feel like it's kind of the same answer that Kenton just gave.
Okay, yeah, sure. We're familiar with these things as pets, not as meat. Although there are plenty of human cultures that mainly view dogs as work animals, and there are also plenty of human cultures that view dogs as a source of meat. What about this animal, this species? Oh, you're just not changing your answers now. Okay, why not horses? Somebody other than Winston and Kenton.
I think it just kind of goes along with the last few things that have been said, like our society kind of frowns upon that.
Okay, so our particular society frowns upon it, but not all societies do. There are societies that will actually eat horses also. If you go to Asia, you will see people who eat horse as a part of their diet. How about this guy? Okay, what's your problems with chimpanzees?
I've never heard anybody eating these.
So people eat chimpanzees in Africa all the time. Eating chimpanzees as bushmeat is actually one of the reasons that these are endangered species. Combination of loss of habitat and being hunted for bushmeat are why chimpanzees and gorillas are on the edge of extinction. So plenty of people do where they occur. We don't eat them here because, of course, they don't occur here. But that's not probably why you're not willing to eat a chimpanzee. And like
I think
told
it
you,
start,
go
I
ahead.
think
Ken.
it starts to get weird when you get close to humanity on the evolutionary tree.
Okay. Anybody else? Let me remind you, I went on a monkey hunt, and while it wasn't a chimpanzee, it was still primates, and they caught a bunch of monkeys, and they came home and ate them, and they offered me some of it, and I had been told that monkeys are generally hard as shoe leather, and I did not partake of monkey, and I did not partake of tortoise, because I really felt bad about all of those animals that got captured on that hunt. So people to this day eat primates in the wild. Anybody else? Any other reasons why you might not want to eat chimpanzee?
Is bushmeat tender?
No, bushmeat is oftentimes pretty tough because these animals are really lean. They're very active in the field, and so yeah, you eat bushmeat because you need to eat bushmeat to survive, not because it's probably a delicacy.
Well, then I'm not eating it because of that.
What's that, Marcus?
I said I'm not going to eat it because of that, dude.
Okay. Another reason you shouldn't eat too close to you on the phylogenetic tree, on the evolutionary tree, is that it's easier to get diseases from organisms if they are closely related to you. And so things like prion diseases and Ebola and these things are, and for that matter, COVID, these are all diseases that came from other organisms that came into the human population through eating bushmeat of one type or another. In the case of COVID, the best hypothesis is that it came from bushmeat in the form of bats, fruit bats, and in the case of Ebola, there are certain primates in Africa that carry Ebola, and then when you eat them and don't cook them properly, you risk contracting that disease, and now it's in the human population that starts to spread from human to human. So a lot of these diseases that are problematic for humans could be gotten rid of if we just got rid of bushmeat. And one of the responses of the most recent coronavirus pandemic is that China actually has really cracked down on the use of bushmeat in the rural diet of Chinese people. Because they're becoming more concerned about disease transmission from other mammals to humans, and this is the case with prion diseases and viruses and some bacteria. What about this? I could have picked any human, but I just figured Elon Musk would be a little humorous. Anybody want to eat a fellow human? Nobody? Why not?
Now Elon Musk tastes good.
Okay, fair point. But when you think about it, though, a human has everything in it that a human needs, doesn't it, nutritionally? Like Elon Musk has everything I need nutritionally to get by because he is me in a biological sense. Other than the fact that you might think Elon Musk would maybe taste a little gamey, why not humans? Thank you for the joke also. This should be easy if you've ever been to see a serial killer movie. Really, none of you can express your unwillingness, your reasons for your unwillingness to consume another human.
There's a lot of blood.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of blood with a lot of things. Bring home some ground beef, there's always blood at the bottom of the package.
I mean, that's very morally wrong because in order to eat them, you have to kill them first.
Okay, so there are once again social taboos against consuming other humans. Can you think of any examples where humans have consumed other humans in the last 50 years? The very famous example I'm thinking of. They actually wrote a book about it, and there's a movie about it. Did you guys ever hear about this airliner that crashed in the Andes with a South American soccer team on it? Killed a number of people in the crash, but a number of people survived, and they were not anywhere near anybody, and they didn't know where the plane went down, and they had to survive for a period of time, and the only food that they really had was the dead corpses of the people who were passengers on the plane, and so they consumed their fellow dead passengers as a means of survival. The name of the book is called Alive. I read it, strangely enough, when I was a child, which may explain all sorts of things about my personality. But they also made a movie out of it that I think is also called Alive. So there are social taboos against consuming other humans. And then there are, of course, also disease reasons for not consuming other humans. So Chapter 17 tries to get at some of these issues. And so if you have your book handy, at the beginning of Chapter 17, Poland starts to think about all the reasons why you might not eat a particular species. What are some of those reasons? And we've talked about some of them so far in class today.
What was the question?
What are some of the reasons that Poland talks about why we are willing to eat certain species but not willing to eat other species?
It's just based on your morals for some of it.
So in some cases, there are moral strictures. So you have a moral code that you want to live by that prevents you from eating certain types of meat, but then allows you, strangely enough, to eat other types of meat. What are the reasons?
some people are just generally vegetarians.
Okay, so in some cases, is anybody a vegetarian in class this semester? We've had vegetarians in the class before, so we happen to not have any this semester, evidently. So some people just are vegetarians because they want to be vegetarians. Whenever I meet a vegetarian, though, I generally ask them, what type of vegetarian are you? And what I'm asking them isn't, are they pescatarian? Are they fruitarian, et cetera, et cetera? I'm asking them what their rationale is for being vegetarian. A faculty member that I know and work with, I work with him in Puerto Rico, but he's a faculty member at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He's a vegetarian, but he's a vegetarian because of the environmental impact of eating flesh. And he started out by getting rid of red meat because of the environmental impacts involved in raising things like cattle and pigs. And then when he started looking into fisheries and the damage that fisheries do, that fishery activities do to ocean stocks and things like this, he phased out fish. And so now he's 100% vegetarian, but he is definitely doing vegetarian, not for health reasons, not for ethical animal suffering reasons. He's doing it simply because it's a better thing to do for the environment, eating lower on the food chain. And so vegetarians, I ask them, what kind of vegetarian are you? You could be an animal welfare vegetarian. You could be a health vegetarian. You could be an environmental vegetarian. There are all sorts of reasons why you might be adopting that particular diet. And I'm always surprised at the number of times when people can't give me a good reason why they are vegetarians. And so then I just place them in the fad vegetarian category because they don't really have a reason for being vegetarian. So it must be something about social pressure or something. So on page 306, he's talking about this. Whatever the cause, the effect is an unusual amount of cultural confusion on the subject of animals, for at the same time, many of us seem eager to expand the circle of our moral consideration to other species. In our factory farms, we're inflicting more suffering on more animals than at any time in history. One by one, science is dismantling our claims to uniqueness as a species, discovering that things such as culture, tool-making, language, and even possibly self-consciousness are not, as we used to think, the exclusive properties of Homo sapiens. And yet most of the animals we eat lead lives organized very much in the spirit of Descartes, who famously claimed that animals were mere machines incapable of thought or feeling. There's a schizoid quality to our relationship with animals today in which sentiment and brutality exist side by side. Half the dogs in America will receive Christmas presents this year. Yet few of us ever pause to consider the life of a pig, an animal easily as intelligent as a dog that becomes a Christmas ham. So the schizophrenia that Poland is talking about is that we view these different animals differently for a wide variety of reasons. And there was a time in the past when humans used to view themselves as a unique species. But of course, every species is unique. As a biologist, if you were not unique as an individual, we would put you in a different species. And so all species, in a sense, are unique. But we have always placed ourselves not only in a unique position, but also in a higher position. And so back to the chimpanzee, Kitten hit on an important point that, you begin to get more and more uncomfortable eating another animal as the animal comes to resemble you more and more. And so the more distant you are to a point in terms of similarity, the more likely you are to be able to consume that animal. Pigs are more intelligent than dogs. Yet we eat pigs and we don't consume dogs. So intelligence clearly isn't the criterion for those of us willing to eat pigs. So a little later on in the chapter, they introduce you to, Poland introduces you to this philosopher named Peter Singer, what is Peter Singer's approach to asking and answering this question of, is it ethical to eat another animal? Peter Singer, anyone?
I know one of the things he talked about was like a lot of people justify eating animals because like we're like it's not equal. But then he also talks about like how like humans aren't necessarily equal to each other. And so we shouldn't be looking at equality. We should be looking at like equality of consideration. So like for what they want to do kind of a thing.
Okay, so he actually goes further than that, but that's an important point. One of the things that you might consider when you think about the ethics of eating another animal is you can ask yourself, you know, would that animal want to be killed and eaten? If you could ask that animal the question, and as a biologist, you know, one of the primary drives of any organism is actually the drive to survive. And so I think if you ask yourself the question objectively, does any animal on Earth want to become the meal for another animal? The answer would be no. In my evolution and ecology class with my first year bio majors that's going on this semester, we're currently doing a case study where we're looking at an evolved predator-prey interaction where a group of newts have evolved a deadly toxin, and the whole thing that is driving that evolution is predation by a snake species that is resistant to the toxin. And so as the snake gets more and more resistant, the newt evolves greater and greater levels of toxicity. And so from evolutionary biology and ecology, I think the answer in terms of if you're going to consider what the animal wants, then you would not eat meat, because I don't think there's any animal that's like, yes, kill me, eat me. So that's part of it. The Singer actually goes further than that. So I'm looking at page 308. The Singer is influenced by a guy named Jeremy Bentham. And Bentham writes, the day may come when the rest of the animal creation may acquire those rights. Singer quotes a famous passage from Jeremy Bentham, the 18th century utilitarian philosopher. Bentham is writing in 1789, after the French had freed their black slaves and granted them fundamental rights, but before the British or Americans had acted. Quote, the day may come when the rest of animal creation may acquire those rights. Is it the faculty of reason or perhaps the faculty of discourse that makes this moral consideration? But a full-grown horse or dog is beyond comparison But a full-grown horse or dog is beyond comparison a more rational as well as a more conversational animal than an infant. So the question is not can they reason nor can they talk, but can they suffer? And so this is the criterion that actually Peter Singer latches onto. Bentham here is playing a powerful card philosophers call the argument from marginal cases. It goes like this. There are humans, infants, the severely retarded, the demented, whose mental function does not rise to the level of a chimpanzee, Even though these people cannot reciprocate our moral attentions, obey the golden rule, etc., we nevertheless include them in the circle of our moral consideration. So on what basis do we exclude the chimpanzee? And then he writes, because he's a chimp, I furiously scribble in the margin, and they're human beings. For Singer, that's not good enough. To exclude the chimp from moral consideration simply because he's not human is no different than excluding the slave simply because he's not white. In the same way that we call that exclusion racist, the animal rights rightist contends it is speciesist to discriminate against chimpanzees solely because he's not a human. And so what's the deal for Peter Singer here? It's not whether they're intelligent, it's not whether they can speak. The question is, are they capable of experiencing suffering? What are your thoughts about that as a criterion for making the decision on whether or not you should consume another organism?
It would seem to me to depend a lot on like what our definition of suffering is, because potentially you could see even a tree is suffering if you have a very expansive definition of what that means. Like, so I just think a lot of it depends on how exactly we're determining what it is to suffer.
Yeah, so the idea of identifying what suffering is becomes tricky, because how would we define suffering? We can actually only define suffering in terms of our own experience. What kinds of things would you put into the category of things that make you suffer beyond sitting through Zoom meetings while you're supposed to be in a face-to-face class if we weren't during the pandemic? How do you as a human define suffering?
Like a lot of physical pain. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Okay, so if you're in pain, and certainly plenty of people struggle with this, chronic pain can cause all sorts of problems. Pain and suffering is a phrase that we use. So certainly pain is a part of suffering. And so from our kind of human perspective, if you're not in pain, then to a certain degree you're not suffering, although you could be suffering in other ways. So getting back to Kenton's example of a tree, one might argue from a kind of human perspective that trees aren't capable of suffering because they're not capable of experiencing pain, because they don't actually have a nervous system, or as far as we know, they can't experience pain, at least not in the way that we do. And we're always going to be limited by our own sensory limitations in terms of being able to put ourselves in the shoes of another organism. What other things might constitute suffering?
I also thought about like the length of like the suffering, I guess. Because I mean, like pain's part of it, but like if you're suffering for an extent, like it's the difference between suffering through pain for what, 10 seconds, but then like hours, and there's a difference between the length, I guess.
Okay, so beyond pain, what would be some things that you might consider suffering? You can ask yourself, what would Joel Salatin consider suffering for an animal?
Maybe you can make appeals to just the overall quality of life that's being experienced. So like perpetually being caged up with like very little space would cause suffering.
So Joel Salatin would probably say, can you guys see the Google imagers from Polyface Farms? No, not Polyface Farms, Pokey Feeders? Is that up on the screen? No, it's not. So Joel Salatin would probably consider this to be suffering. These animals packed together in these pens, some cases quite dense, walking around in their own shit and piss day after day after day, awaiting the inevitable day that they will be hauled off to the slaughterhouse to basically be killed so humans can consume them. Salatin would consider these animals to be suffering because a cow evolved to be running around in a pasture eating grass. That is when, if a cow can be happy, that would be a happy cow, living out its life as its evolutionary history kind of intended it to be. And so back when we were talking about Joel Salatin's farm, he made this point that he wants his animals on his farm to act like they would act if they were still out in nature. He wants a chicken to behave like a chicken. He wants a cow to behave like a cow. He wants a pig to behave like a pig. And he tries to create environments that allow these organisms to kind of embrace their natural habits. And it's Poland talked about this a little bit when he talks about animal happiness towards the end of this chapter. So this would be another form of suffering, long-term confinement in less than optimal conditions. What other kinds of suffering might you think about?
There's the suffering of like broken attachments. I'd say there's probably animals that we take for food that are capable of social bonds that suffer when they have their familial bonds or social bonds broken.
Oh yeah, sure. Strangely enough, even my chickens have social bonds, even though they're not a grouping organism out in nature. Typically, they're not a flocking organism out in nature. They certainly have imprinted upon my partner and I, and so yeah, social organisms, when you leave them in isolation, are not as well off as they could be if they were kept in those social environments. As a matter of fact, this actually occurs with dogs quite often. It's oftentimes better to have two dogs in a house rather than a dog by itself, because dogs are evolutionary derivatives from an organism that was in the evolutionary past a pack animal. And so when you bring a dog into your house, it's best to view yourself as the leader of the pack, and then you're incorporating that dog into your pack. And if you're not the alpha dog, then the dog that you bring into your environment is going to want to be the alpha dog, and then they can become discipline problems. But oftentimes, having another dog so that you have more than one dog in your pack is useful for those dogs, just from the standpoint of socialization and kind of them behaving more like their natural instincts, push them towards behaving. Same thing with horses. Solitary horses don't do generally as well as horses in social environments, because once again, they're a herd animal. So what I want you to think about between now and tomorrow is the stuff towards the end of this chapter, where Poland basically talks about this distinction between animal suffering and animal happiness. And I also want you to pay special attention to the argument on page 310, where there are some people who are advocates of eating meat who basically argue that we wouldn't even have cows and pigs and chickens if not for the requirements for them to be farmed for meat. You have some information from this class that speaks to that as a valid argument. So for Friday, we'll be finishing up chapter 17 through the end of chapter 17. And then the other thing that I want you to do in your spare time between now and Friday, we might get to this on Friday, but we might not get to it on Monday. But there is a website that I want you to go and play around on. The website is called Mapping Inequality. If you just type Mapping Inequality into your web browser, it'll take you to this website. And I would like you to read the introduction that basically talks about what this website is about. This website is about a practice from the first half of the 20th century, referred to as redlining. And then what I would like you to do actually is go to the Mapping Inequality site, and once you are there, click on some of these cities. We're going to actually be paying attention to Kansas City. And when you get to Kansas City, you can see what the redlining map is like for Kansas City. And just explore a little bit between now and Friday and Monday on what this idea of redlining is about. Because that's going to serve the basis of part of our conversations going into next week. All right, let me know if you have any questions about your papers throughout the day today, and I'll be looking for those by 5. Any questions? All right, Marcus, you have some questions, actually?